So good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Taylor. I am the Economic Development Manager for the City of Tualatin. We're glad that you can participate today in this Basalt Creek informational webinar. For your information, this webinar is being live recorded. For those that are trying to get on, we'll wait for a few more minutes, but just a brief introduction. We have Aaron Ingman, who is the Community Development Planner. We have Rich Mueller, Parks and Recreation Department, Steve Coper, Community Development, and Ross Hoover, Parks and Recreation, and Kim McMillan, Community Development. This informational webinar is limited by Zoom capacity to 100. So if your neighbor or someone that you know cannot get in, this will be posted on our city's website for those that are interested. And we'll wait for a few more seconds to allow individuals to join. So today, the purpose of this informational webinar is just to provide area residents and interested individuals with an overview of the City of Tualatin upcoming development efforts in the Basalt Creek and Southwest concept plan areas. The departments that are represented here today, as we did in the introduction, is the City of Tualatin's Community Development Department, the City of Tualatin's Park and Recreation Department, and then Tualatin's Urban Renewal Agency. Today we'll begin with the City of Tualatin's Community Development.
Thank you, Jonathan. So I'm here to provide some context with the long-range planning efforts that establish the Basalt Creek area and designations as we move forward into urbanization. In 2004, Metro, our regional planning organization, identified the Basalt Creek area as a good candidate for urban growth due to its proximity to I-5 and the Tualatin and Wilsonville city boundaries. And then in 2013, Tualatin and Wilsonville began our concept planning efforts. 5 years later, the concept plan was completed and the Tualatin Comprehensive Plan and Development Code was updated in 2019 to incorporate the Basalt Creek area. Going forward, development in the area will be shaped by land use applications submitted by property owners and developers. To provide some context to the previous slide, a concept plan identifies the vision for future land use and identifies high-level designs for transportation and infrastructure systems to support the anticipated development. The comprehensive plan is the guiding document for land development. The plan supports statewide planning goals and is implemented by the zoning map, development code, transportation system plan, and urban renewal areas. Updating the comprehensive plan provides consistency with all the planning efforts that went into the Basalt Creek concept plan. It also broadly applies development policies and regulations to the Basalt Creek area so that annexation is possible for future urban development. A variety of residential zones are designated in the Basalt area as shown in the yellow and orange areas to support a range of housing, including single-family homes on individual lots, townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, and up to 3-story apartments. Non-residential zones include neighborhood commercial, which is typically developed as smaller shops or stores, kind of akin to a plaid pantry. And it also includes manufacturing zones as shown in the blue areas to support development similar to the area in Tualatin around 124th and Leventon, where employer campuses are located. The Basalt Creek planning efforts identified the future road network based upon anticipated trip generation that may result from future development. Local roads within this network will be designed and built by developers and property owners as the region develops. The city has also adopted a parks master plan, which identified the need for 2 off-street trails in the Basalt Creek area, and it's based on population projections as shown on this slide. As part of the comprehensive plan update, the public water and sewer plan maps were updated to show planned infrastructure in the Basalt Creek area. At present, public water and sewer lines are generally not available and will need to be extended through development. Connections are located along the current southern boundary near Norwood Road and Helena Street. On this slide, this slide showing future water connections in the dashed blue, and the next slide shows future sewer connections in the brown areas. Annexing into Tualatin and future urbanization is strictly voluntary and is initiated by property owners. We are starting to receive interest from property owners along the eastern edge of Basalt Creek and are seeing land use applications for annexations and amendments in support of future residential development applications. We anticipate a future subdivision along this area, butting up to I-5 south of Norwood Road in between Green Hill Lane. And this area shown in the red rectangular area is a future project. The annexation is complete, but we anticipate an architectural review to be submitted for a future housing project. And what's in store for Basalt Creek? In the future and beyond, we're looking at a stormwater management plan, potential annexations, and potential parcel development. If you wish to learn more, feel free to research some information on our planning webpage or reach out to planning staff and we can help answer any of your questions and guide you to some answers. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Erin. And now that we have a lot more participants join, I'll explain the ending portion of this informational webinar. After we do the presentations by each individual division, we're going to allow a Q&A session. So in your box below, you'll see a Q&A portion down below on the bottom portion of your screen. If you have a question, you may submit that to city staff and we'll answer that. For those questions that we do not get to or that we aren't able to answer at the time, all Q&A questions that are proposed, whether they're answered today or in the future, will be posted on the website as well along with this video. Next up is Ross and Rich from the Cities of Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Ross Hoover, Parks and Recreation Director for the City of Tualatin, and Rich Mueller is on the call as well today, and he is our Planning and Development Manager for the City of Tualatin for Parks. So thank you all for joining. Really appreciate. I see a lot of names on the list of attendees who we've interacted with on this project already, and just super fantastic that you're engaged and part of this process. You know, as we think about Basalt Creek, the future of Basalt Creek, your participation and involvement in the planning for what Basalt Creek becomes is so vital. And so your connection here today and your continued connection throughout the processes that we'll talk about is absolutely important, because the work we're doing now are the plans that we're laying for the future. And so you get to be a part of that, a key part of that. So let's talk a little bit about Parks and Recreation. So we are embarking on visioning, creating a plan for, a blueprint for the future parks in the Basalt Creek area. Not just parks, but also trails, natural areas, anything that you can think of as publicly managed land for the benefit, for the recreational and wellness and health and socialization, those types of benefits. That's really what Parks and Recreation focuses on. And so we have a little bit of direction, but not much. In the Parks and Recreation Master Plan that was adopted in late 2018, you'll see in this first section of bullets, what are the existing plans? Well, in that master plan, here's what we heard from community. And so this is a 10 to 20 acre park space, worth of park space in Basalt Creek area. Greenways, natural parks and trail connections, protection and for natural areas and habitats, a need for master planning, which is really the work we're doing right now. And then some type of community gathering space, a community park. And so that's what's in the master plan that's adopted by City Council. The detail of that is the work that we're just starting. And so that is going to be a conversation. We've brought a consultant on board, and we are just gearing up for, done some initial work with our consultant, but gearing up for engagement with community. And so there are going to be a number of opportunities as we look towards summer, as we can hopefully get outside. We'll probably have some virtual meetings and gatherings about your thoughts for what the parks and natural areas and trails in Basalt Creek can become. And that's the second bullet here, is how can you share your ideas? And that's to engage in that process, in that series of meetings that you'll see on Zoom and in person, hopefully. So on the next slide, you'll see a little bit about the detail that we're going to dig into in this planning process. We're going to look at market studies. We're going to look at detail of natural areas and sensitive areas in Basalt Creek. We're going to look at some of that background detail, and then we're going to talk about that detail as it applies to parks. Given that knowledge, where do we see parks going in Basalt Creek? Where do the trails are best suited in Basalt Creek? And look at some specific design elements and design options for those different sites. And that's through that public outreach process that I'm describing this work. And then we're going to dig down into some of the specific design programs within Basalt Creek. What types of uses, what types of activities do we want to see at these parks in Basalt Creek? Are there specific areas that are best suited for a trail? Are there better areas that are best suited for natural space? We're going to identify those areas through this process. So we really invite you to be a part. We actually need you to be a part of this. If you don't, let us know what you think. We don't have a good plan that's informed by community, and that's really what we're all about. And so the next bullet, where can I find more information? That link that you see on your screen is our Basalt Creek Parks and Recreation Plan website. So we've set up a website for this work. That's the site you'll want to go to. On that site, you can sign up for an email list. So we will send out emails updating you about the upcoming meetings. We'll also send the surveys. We'll have a variety of different surveys that we'll be sending out to community. All of that you can sign up for on that link that you see on your screen. We want you to be a part of this. So please join us. And as many of you have already plugged into this process, we're just getting started here. So looking forward to continued involvement, and your ideas are key. And you'll see Rich Mueller's phone number at the bottom of this slide. Rich is the project manager for our Basalt Creek plan. So thank you so much. That is all I have to say about parks for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Ross. So how we incorporate all the wonderful work that the city has done over the last 20 years, and also the plans that have been adopted, from the Basalt Creek concept plan to the future work that's going to be coming online in the next several years, is a thing called urban renewal. And the city of Tualatin has a long, successful history of urban renewal. So we had CURD that took an old abandoned, or not old abandoned, but an industrial area in our downtown and revitalized it into the town commons, or the commons that we know today. And then also the Leventon Tax Increment Finance District that took a greenfield area and turned it into one of the major employment centers in the Portland metro area. So what is urban renewal? Urban renewal is a financial tool to fund projects that have been identified in the urban renewal plan. Right now in this area, we have a task force and also a public outreach effort that's determining what projects that have been identified in the past through various plan documents to include those in update moving forward with this new plan. But the purpose of urban renewal is to make those public investments in the designated geographic areas to remove blight, to improve property values, and to leverage private investment. And most of these public investments spur redevelopment in areas where they might not otherwise occur or where there are identified gaps in those funding. Urban renewal utilizes tax increment financing, which is not new taxes to fund projects in the geographic area. So what is tax increment financing? So it is the assessed valuations increase from a frozen base. So for example, if an urban renewal plan is developed and established, it will take the current year that is established and freezes that base for all taxing districts. And then whatever increase that normally occurs through the property valuation, that increment goes to the Urban Renewal Authority to do projects in this area. And so here's just a simple graph that explains that increment over the span of years and also tax increment in dollar amounts. And so as the district is in aged valuation, that's when projects are able to be completed, because then you have the funding necessarily to incorporate those projects. But then after a set time, all that increment will then be distributed back to the taxing districts that agreed to this plan document. And so our city council has taken a long, studious approach to looking at urban renewal in this area. In 2018, the city of Tualatin did Tualatin 2040, which produced the Economic Opportunities Analysis and H&A. They began that, it was adopted in 2019. In 2019, phase 1 and phase 2 of this process, we provided an education series for our city council and the city as a whole. And then we officially closed the Central Urban Renewal District. In 2020, we did a feasibility study to determine if urban renewal is allowed in this area, and it was adopted by the City Council in November of 2020. And this year, we're in the process of phase 4, which is identifying those projects and adopting the plan in this area. And as we move forward into 2022 and beyond, that's when work will actually begin on these projects. So we want to provide a reference of where we're talking about. In the right-hand corner, you'll see the proposed area in which all these projects that the city is working on will occur. So we have the Southwest Concept area, which is in the northern part of this photo to the right. And then down below it is Cherry Stemmed by 124th. And then you have the Basalt Creek area. So what is the goal? Is to develop a finance plan to implement identified projects from the area development. So that includes the Basalt Creek Concept Plan, the Southwest Industrial Concept Plan, the TSP, Tualatin 2040, the Moving Forward Bond, and also Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And down below it, you'll see the timeline in which this plan is expected to be adopted, with it culminating in September of 2020, so this year. If you would like to know more, you can visit the Urban Renewal page at tualatinoregon.gov. We'll have a virtual open house in July, which will provide table stations for you to learn more about urban renewal and what's going on, as well as provide feedback and for anything that you want to include in the open comment period. And then in June, it will go before the Tualatin Development Commission, and then in August, it'll go before the City Council with a public hearing. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, but now is the opportunity for participants to ask any questions that we may be able to answer using the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. Okay, so we have the first question. And I am going to direct that to planning. And if we would read the question out loud.
Sure, I can read the question. The question is, Southwest Boone's Ferry is already failing with the current traffic level in afternoons and mornings. This plan has massive residential industrial build out. What changes improvements to Wilsonville/I-5 as planned. And so I think given the complexity of the answer, that's one that we would do a little bit more research in forming an answer and include with the include with the question and answer that'll be posted to the web.
Thanks, Steve. So that is the only question that we have from attendees so far. As noted in the slide presentations, if you have specific questions regarding any particular projects that were mentioned, those slides had the contact information for residents or interested parties to ask those questions to the respective department.
Jonathan, if I can add quickly, this is really the first kickoff meeting, right? And so this is just one really focused on information sharing about how you can connect with these different processes. And we know that you're going to have more questions throughout these processes, and we would invite you to connect with those different processes to make sure you ask those questions. So this is, I guess, to say not your only opportunity, just your first informational opportunity.
I think we have one more question. And I think that's going to be to community development.
And I can take this one. The question is, Horizon High School shows residential development. Will this be developed and owned by the church? And so I think that the question is referring to development that wraps around the church site that is not owned by the church, but is the combination of, I think now it's one property owner, Lennar, but was previously two major property ownerships. The Horizon High School does have internal to them a campus redevelopment plan where they would ultimately create more school buildings, but that's not part of the discussion at this point. Hopefully that answers the question.
And as Ross was indicating, this is just one step in the larger effort of each individual's department on outreach and also just project notification. One thing that our Urban Renewal Task Force recommended a month ago was a phone call system. And so we implemented that over the weekend, and we wanted to see how successful that was. And we got a positive response back from that. And so this is kind of also testing the waters on what is good public outreach for the area and kind of moving forward with that. And so Ross, thank you for calling that out on the larger approach. So we have another question, and I think that's going to be to Parks and Recreation.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. And the question is, there are a lot of decisions yet to be made about parks in Basalt Creek, and that's absolutely true. We have a general idea that came out of the master plan process, and that's really all we have at this point. That the question specifically is, we know we have that, but is the city leaning towards a location of a community meeting place or a park on one side of Boone's Ferry versus the other? And quite honestly, we're not. The city's not. The city's very open to any and all ideas and thoughts based on specific data that our consultant is providing. They're going to do some of that background research to as we have these meetings in the future, that we have some information to go off of, and we use that information plus our community desires about what might seem like the best fit for a natural area, park or trails within Basalt Creek. So that is completely yet to be determined, and that's a very good question. If that interests you, we want you to be a part of the process. These are your parks. These are your parks, and so you are the ones that figure out what the next generation of our system looks like.
Thanks, Ross. There's another question, and I think that will be to community development.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. There's a couple of questions we can just take in sequence, but I think that, so the first question is there a projected timeline for sewer lines down Boone's Ferry Road? And I will answer this question in a little more detail as part of the posted questions, but sewer timelines are in large part being development driven at this point, but we'll see if we can get a more detailed answer specifically addressing sewer in this area. And then the second question directed towards community development is, Tualatin Life had a series of articles about the bridge across Basalt Creek. Is the city council reconsidering that bridge? And again, I think that's something that we would need to do a little bit more research to answer that question and post it on the web. So thank you for that question as well.
And currently the last question will be to Parks and Recreation.
Thank you, Jonathan. And the question is, what funding can the city use to purchase future parkland in Basalt Creek? And that's a great question. We have within our final park plan, Basalt Creek Park Plan document, we will have a list of potential funding sources. But what I can tell you is in the past year, during the pandemic, government revenue has been significantly reduced in some key areas. One of those areas was lottery revenue. And lottery revenue is the exclusive funding source at the state level for state parks grant dollars to local cities. And so that fund is has been underfunded in the past year. We don't know what that looks like coming out of the pandemic and what the funding level might be at the state level. What we do know is prior to the pandemic, there were about $3 million statewide within that fund. So not a lot of money for if you consider all of the cities within the state of Oregon. That is certainly one source we're going to try to utilize. The other is when the Parks and Rec master plan was updated in late 2018, City Council also took action shortly thereafter on a revision to our parks SDC. So SDC is a system development charge. So as developers come in and develop new properties, in particular in Basalt Creek, those developments pay a fee for their impact on the park system. So essentially they contribute one time, they pay this fee when they're issued building permits. That fee goes into a fund exclusively for the expansion of our park system. And so that SDC mechanism is going to be another key source that we will utilize to expand parks in Basalt Creek. As areas in Basalt Creek are annexed into the city, that'll be an available source to pay for acquisitions of new parkland. There are a number of other sources that I'm sure you'll see listed in our Basalt Creek Parks Plan. We're going to try to use as many different sources as we can. We're going to piece together a funding strategy to make the investments we need to make to provide those key, really vital recreation spaces. And one thing about the pandemic we have seen is people need a place to go. And during the pandemic, it was very clear that parks were that for a lot of people. And we want to create a vision for those types of vital spaces in Basalt Creek so that they're public spaces in perpetuity designated for the benefit of the residents of Basalt Creek.
Thanks, Ross. And there's one looks like another question. I think this will go to myself. Will urban renewal funding create shovel-ready sites for the entire Basalt Creek area? And that's an interesting question, because urban renewal can only do things that is basically titled highest and best use. And so with property development, there has to come studies that are associated with proposed development. So it has to meet that threshold. So simply saying shovel ready, I don't think urban renewal will be doing that. But however, urban renewal can look at taking greenfield development and developing it based on the highest and best use study of that area. And so the way that we're framing this is Basalt Creek is going to mirror Leventon's efforts for urban renewal. So currently there are no more questions associated with this webinar. If there are any more, please take the opportunity to write them now, or if you have specific or more detailed questions that you're looking for answers to, we'll be able to post the contact up on our website for those specific individuals and projects. So I think, honestly, that if there are no more questions associated, and oh, we do have one more. Okay, I think this is going to go to Parks and Recreation. Ross, you're muted.
Great question. Let me repeat this back. So the question is, as lands within the Basalt Creek area, including the Basalt Creek Canyon area, are owned by multiple property owners, how will the city implement and develop the development of large parcels or large assemblages of park areas if a property owner does not want to sell a particular piece of land to the city? And so that there is certainly some of that that we don't know clearly yet what that looks like yet. So it's a general question with some specifics required to answer that question. So we don't know yet what you as property owners and interested parties and future residents of Tualatin want to see in Basalt Creek in terms of parks investments and natural areas and formal parks and athletic fields. We don't know yet what that looks like. And so once we have that information, that'll really help guide us as to what parts of Basalt Creek best fit that particular type of use. In terms of natural areas, there are some fantastic, amazing natural areas in Basalt Creek. And we already know of that. However, we would very much anticipate those of you who are interested in seeing those areas as parkland or certain areas as parkland, we would anticipate that come out in our engagement work. So yes, that is a iterative process that's done first by identifying what specific activities and uses we want to see. And that helps us determine what criteria we use. What selection criteria are we using to cite a specific park? And then we go from there to select specific general areas that might be interesting in terms of acquisition on behalf of the city. So that's a very general answer and response to your question. And I look forward to having many more conversations about this topic.
So I see there are no more questions. If there are any more, please. We have 25 minutes. I don't think we'll take up that entire time, but if there are more questions, we'll be more than happy to answer those. In the interim, as we said before, this webinar will be posted up on the city's website with the associated questions for a more detailed answer where we can provide those. All right. So I think that's going to be it for today's informational webinar. As the city moves forward with many of these projects, there will be multiple opportunities for you to get more involved or learn more about these specific projects. And if you need contact to any of these individuals on this panel, you can either directly contact me at jtaylor@tualatin.gov and we'll get you in contact with these individuals, or go to the website for the PowerPoint that's posted and click on their emails directly, or call them. Some have their phone numbers posted. So I think that's going to be it for today's webinar. Thank you so much for taking time out of your Monday during lunch to just kind of have an overview of what's coming up in the Basalt Creek and Southwest areas. I hope you have a great day. And as always, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to any one of us on this panel or your city council members.
Thank you all.
Thank you.